Yay.
Oh, don't say anything incriminating now.
Nothing incriminating? Well, gee. That's like everything I say, isn't it? Phone is on D&D so that when Twitter lights up, it doesn't bother me.
All right, now I'm going to go notify all my different Slack channels. This is the fun part of the pre-show is it's just he's sending spam to a bunch of Slacks I'm in. All right. All right. All my spam is out. Just let the people rake in now.
Let's hope.
Yeah, this is the fun part, just waiting for people to come in the room. And then it's also my opportunity to make sure all the streams are working.
Yeah.
So I have a TV here in my office, and I put YouTube up on it so I can see, if it's streaming to YouTube, that's where I see it. And we're probably on a 10-second delay between what you say and what happens on the screen. Worth remembering when you ask for feedback.
Yes.
You need to wait a couple seconds. All right, let me find testing 101 for devs. I see it. Excellent.
Yay.
All right, and let me mute the TV. All right. All right, so we are live. Let's see. Do I see viewers coming in? We're working on that part. Yeah, we have a couple of people watching, so that's good. So if you're out there and you're in the chat, say hi.
Hi.
We actually had a couple of people watching on Periscope last time, which was a lot of fun.
I'm a bad millennial. I've never used Periscope.
I didn't expect much from it, and then we tried it on the last stream, and there was one person watching on Periscope. I don't remember who it was. But I said, well, if you're on Periscope, you need to say hi to me. So I got a tweet. It was the one gent going, it's me. I'm the one person on Periscope.
Yeah, I guess they call me a Zennial. So like I'm a little bit Gen X, a little bit millennial. So like Snapchat, Periscope, even Instagram a little bit. Like I just didn't get into.
I'm the same way. So you're like that early 80s baby?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So I was 83.
I didn't realize you're younger than me.
Yeah.
It's not cool.
So
I'm leaving. I'm quit.
that doesn't happen commonly. Usually it's like, oh, you talk to a lot of these people nowadays, and it's like, oh, I was born in 92. I'm like, get off my lawn. It's like, I don't want to talk to you.
We had an intern this year who was born in 2000.
Oh my gosh.
And I almost threw myself off a bridge. It's like, you were born the year I graduated high school.
Oh. It used to be so great when you could be that person, talking to older folks and going, they said, well, I graduated high school in 89. Blah, blah. I was like, oh yeah. I was in like second grade or first grade. Or not even that, probably like kindergarten in 89 for me. And I'm bad at math right now. That sounds about right. It was, and they're like, oh, I could have been your babysitter. I'm like, no. You couldn't have been my mom or my dad. It's like, you're old.
Yeah, and legit, I could have been this girl's mom.
Yeah.
She's a woman. She's not a girl. But I'm sorry, if you were born the year I graduated high school, you were forever a child to me.
Yeah. And when they're in their 30s and 40s one day, and be like, nope, you're still a little kid that walked in the door. So we got some people coming in. We got Jonathan in the chat. Jonathan, how are you? Jonathan is in every episode. He always chimes in. So
nice.
Jonathan, I'm going to put you on reserve we're going to have some questions later and you need to answer them. So sorry, Jenna. I talked over you. What were you saying?
That's okay. I said, Jonathan, we're counting on you.
You're our only hope. Let's see. All right. Yeah, he's going to do his best, he says.
Good.
I wish there was a way. I need to play around with this restream chat a little bit more because I like to get this chat somewhere where everyone can see it. Like, I'd love to give you a link and say, here's the chat.
Oh,
go. So if you want to go look at the combined chat.
Yeah. Although I don't multitask well, so I could not like watch the chat and talk at the same time. I'd be like reading the chat log to everybody.
No, I understand. So if I see any questions, I will stop you and I'll say, hey, I have a question from Jonathan. Excellent. All right. Uh-oh, I pressed the wrong button.
No.
So the problem with checking all the streams to make sure they're working is they all just start playing at full volume.
Oh.
Which I don't want to do. All right. I think we're good. I think we're doing good. We'll get a couple more people in here as we go. We're starting to build up. So we're up to about 5 or 6 viewers right now, which is a good solid number for still being 7 minutes out.
That is more than I had last time for the entire stream.
And it will go up. We've had really good numbers lately. So I've been happy with it. And
people like Revolution Conference liked this talk, so I'm excited to do it again.
Yeah. And that's what I said in a couple of my Slacks is like, you remember Jenna from Revolution Conf? And I don't know if that's good or bad. So I'll say,
yeah, we remember her.
Oh, I didn't get to go to that talk. Let me go. Or people will say, no, I went to that talk. All right. And let's see. Oops,
let's hope when I give my caveat, I don't lose everybody.
I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
All right. Yep, the numbers are coming in.
I just realized my hair matches my wall.
Hey.
That was not the plan.
Just don't turn on the green screen feature. If you turn that on, maybe your hair will disappear.
Just disappear completely.
I've this background works really well with it, but you can go in Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
You can change the background. Zoom, I swear, has the best background removal technology than a lot of apps that specifically have background removal in them. If I have my green screen up right now, it would work perfectly.
Okay, so I was gonna say right now it looks a little weird, and I feel like it gives you a slight delay.
Oh, does it? It probably does. Yeah, I'll turn that off.
You're not saying what your lips are saying.
Oh, okay. Well, that would be a problem.
It's not that much. We're talking about like a second, but it's enough. And I'm like,
that's why we don't use it too much. Then you get some of them. They're just, yeah. I need to turn that off.
That's a lot.
It's really, yeah.
I don't know what purpose that would serve.
It also doesn't help that I've noticed with Zoom over the past couple months, Zoom is real resource heavy now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll get to a period where I'm lagging terribly. Zoom just all of a sudden just starts lagging like a beast on my machine. And I'm not quite sure why. And then all of a sudden it's just perfect again. It's like Zoom catches up.
I remember reading this thing about there being a weird issue with the client that like on Mac.
I'm on Windows, so that.
Okay, that wouldn't be it. But like I have to manually end the client on Mac. And it's a bug. And they acknowledge that like, oh, we just didn't think for that requirement. But all of us Mac users are like, maybe you should have thought about that requirement.
Yeah. I did read about the whole secret like background local server thing that Zoom does. That was you could let someone just join any random Zoom call if you knew the number. I forgot. Or no, you just click a button in in a web page and it would connect you to this random Zoom call that just went forever. Yeah, it's like I really like Zoom. Zoom for 98% of what it does is really good.
Yeah.
But there's just this 2% performance issue that kind of sucks. I need that fixed. And I don't know if I'm the only one that has this issue. I've talked to a couple of people who have said, "Oh yeah, I've had that issue." And I accidentally closed my windows. Oops. Let me fix this. All right. Open in browser. All right. There we go. All right. So Jonathan out there. So Jonathan is local to where I am. And he was commenting that I was not at the local user group meeting this month. And that's totally my fault. I was on vacation. So
how dare you, sir?
Yeah, I know. I took a day off, took a week off. And didn't do anything.
Fun?
Went on a cruise. I spoke at Coder Cruise.
Oh, that's right. How was that?
Coder Cruise was a lot of fun. It's a very small conference. Mm-hmm. It was probably 60 people. I mean, like good size for a cruise ship. Mm-hmm. And Eli and Heather, the folks who run that event, they've been running it for 4 years now. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was their fourth cruise conference. It was the third Coder Cruise. And yeah, it was really good. Just a good number of people. The talk I did was on text adventure games, and it was well attended. It was 8:30 in the morning on the day we were at sea. And I probably had 20 people in my room, 25, wow. Which I'm not going to balk at for being on a cruise ship at 8:30 in the morning, where you could either just stay in bed, or you could be up on the deck and just do something else other than go into a talk.
Yeah, we're still sleeping from the night before.
Yeah. Well, that was my plan. My wife and I we went to dinner, then we went to the comedy club, and they had a show, and we did all this stuff, and it was getting late. Yeah. I went, you know what? I kind of just want to go to bed because I know I have to get up at 7. I went down and got breakfast and then went into my talk. And
nice.
So, but that's the nice part is you're sitting in a talk like, I'm feeling hungry. Go upstairs, get some free food, bring your free food back down with you, and finish listening to the talk. The ship we were on had a burrito bar, just as many burritos as you could eat. So I would go up, get a burrito, bring the burrito down with me to the room.
Were there like non-conference people on it too?
Yeah. Oh, well, so we are a very small subset of the cruise. So it's a regular cruise, and then Eli and Heather, who run it, they work with a travel agent who works with Carnival, mm-hmm. and Carnival books us 2 rooms on the ship that aren't used during the day. So like one of them is one of the lounges, doesn't open until after 6, after dinner time. So we use it during the day, and they provide a projector, and there's little pull out screens, and they're not good conference rooms. Like one of the rooms we were in was a bar parlor, and there were just these pillars in the middle of the room that normally wouldn't matter, except if you're sitting in the back trying to look at the screen in the front, there's a huge pillar in front of your face. So you just couldn't. There were only a handful of seats that were good, and you can't go into the Coder Cruise without. You need your talk to be not require internet, because while we had internet on board, and if you paid for the internet, there's a good chance it would not work during your talk. So you design your talk around not needing internet access. So a couple of the folks there, what's his name? Chris, Lorenzo, I think that's how you say his name, works with Comcast. He did a talk on progressive web apps, and it would have normally been an internet needed talk, but he recorded videos of all his internet segments. So he would just play the video back, and that worked really well. So yeah, you need to go in with a different mindset of how a conference should work.
Yeah.
But we had our own tables at dinner time, and it was a good time to chat with some of the other attendees and speakers and stuff. So we had a good time. I was on it with Tessa. What was Tessa's last name? From Revolution Conf this past year. I'm totally blanking on Tessa's last name. But she was at our table for dinner. I'm like, hey, Tessa, I remember you from a couple months ago. It's nice when I can go on the Coder Cruise and know a good number of people. Mm-hmm. Last year I went, and it was my first year. I knew nobody at all. It was all completely new. But we are past the top of the hour, so we should kick this sucker off. So we're going to do this. All right, I'm going to hit record, and we'll go live. All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to the SwiftKick Show. My name is Kevin Griffin. I'm the owner of SwiftKick. We're a software training and consulting company based out of Southeast Virginia. And today, I am joined by Jenna Charlton. How are you today, Jenna?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You are another repeat speaker on the SwiftKick Show. So welcome back.
Thank you.
So we've been chatting here live for probably the past 20 minutes. So if you're watching this on a recording, we do a pre-show before the live show on Twitch, YouTube, Periscope, Facebook. We also do it on Mixer, but no one watches Mixer for anything. But we're in a variety of places live right now. We got a couple folks in the chat, and hopefully we'll get some more over the next couple minutes. But if you're out in the chat right now, say hi, tell us where you're from. And we do have a person watching on Mixer. So very cool. All right. So thank you for correcting me live. That's awesome. We had the same thing happen with Periscope last week, or last time. But Jenna, as a repeat, you kind of already know how this structure goes, where we're just going to let you jump right into it. So you're going to talk to us today about testing. That's a lot of your background. I think that's what you talked to us before about. And I'm really looking forward to this talk because as a developer, I know that I probably don't put as much into testing as I probably should on a variety of our projects. So I'm hoping you give me some good pointers here that lead me into the right direction.
I'm trying not to give you a disapproving look.
All right. Well, that's fine. I get them all the time. I'm just kind of used to it now. But we have folks in the chat, and I do know that there's going to be a couple of times where Jenna's going to ask questions to the chat, and I will relay answers as they come in. But if y'all have any questions at all, just put them in the chat. I have an aggregate chat across all the different platforms. But with that, Jenna, would you like to take over?
I would. So let's make this share work.
I see it.
You see it. Awesome.
All righty.
Let's get let's get everything out of the way. All right. So thank you, everybody. This is Testing 101 for developers. I'm going to give you a quick caveat, and I hope it doesn't make you log off. I'm not going to teach you how to write a unit test. I'm not going to teach you how to write an automated check. However, what we are going to talk about is thinking like a tester and techniques to use to start improving the way you're doing your own testing as you're doing development work. So a little bit about me. I've been testing for around 8 years. I don't know the exact amount, but it's like 8 or 9. I work for Progressive Insurance. I don't know Flo. I do have some friends who have met her, though. I am a cat mom, married to a cat dad. I'm a deacon at my church. I love pro wrestling and punk rock. And my other big thing is I'm into web accessibility. So feel free to ask me about any of those things, especially A11Y. So here's the first time I throw it to all of you. Throw out for me what you would do to test this screen, this really basic logon. Just give me one test case. And it could be something super simple. It could be something super complicated, but I kind of want to start talking about what testing really is. And this is a good place to start. Looking at you, Jonathan.
We're getting in some answers. So Daddy Robot says blank username, blank password, hang login. The user can log in. We're getting a little stream of feedback.
I like blank username, blank password.
Yep.
That's a good one.
What if I type in an email address and not a username? I get that a lot in my app. It's like,
yeah. And that's, of course, requirement specific, because
yep.
the requirement could be that an email address can be a username.
Yep. So Brian is saying the same thing. Is the username in the format that we're expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's gone quiet. So I think you're on your own now.
That's good. I like it.
Oh, different browsers?
Different browsers. Nice.
Do the links to forgot password or register work?
Mm-hmm. I like these.
Yes.
I like it more than what I got the last time, which were like use SQL injection. So yes, you probably want to try that. However, it's not going to be the first thing you go to. And it's certainly not going to be what you do to check to make sure it works.
Yeah. My name's Bobby Tables.
All right. So I'm throwing it to you one more time. What do you all think testing is? Give me just a general statement of what you think testing is.
Well, I think testing is making sure that things work the way that we expect them to.
Okay. So meeting expectations functionally.
Yeah.
All right.
Saving future self a ton of trouble. The systematic approach of finding all possible outcomes to all possible incomes.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I like that. All right. I think that's a good place.
Again. Yeah. Okay. We're on a delay, so people are hearing this about 5-10 seconds afterwards.
So here's what I think of when I think about testing. We're going to start with what testing isn't. Testing isn't checking. And what I mean is that testing is not just checking a box to say that something works. Since testing isn't checking, what testing really is exploring. Testing is going out and kind of taking an adventure through your application. It's an opportunity to learn what you don't know. A lot of software development is about knowing what you know, but testing is so much about the unknown unknowns and finding the things that you would never, ever expect. Testing is also not a guarantee of bug-free software. Somebody tells you that they can guarantee you bug-free, one of three things is happening. Either one, they're just lying to you. Like they just think that you don't know better. Or two, they're not testing. And a lot of people will say, well, my software is bug-free. Of course it is, because you haven't gone to look for the bugs. And the third possibility is that you're using only automation and doing no manual exploratory testing and doing no automated visual checking. And there's some tools out there now that do that we can talk about later. So if testing isn't a guarantee of bug-free software, what it really is this idea of good enough quality. And we're going to get into that more later. But good enough quality is basically saying that we are confident that this is good enough. And then the last thing that testing is not just looking for bugs. And in fact, testing really isn't looking for bugs at all. Bugs are kind of, when we talk about manual testing, are the happy accident that you find along the way as you're exploring. Because you can find things that are issues that aren't bugs. They can be requirement-based issues. They can be that functionally everything works as it was built to work, but it doesn't meet the heart of the requirement. So if it's not just looking for bugs, what it really is this idea of usability, making sure that the application really fits the needs of your user. And accessibility, when we talk about the needs of disabled users and users of all levels of ability, regardless of disability, And that also includes users that maybe are low skill. So when we think about, like, I like to think about my grandmother, who really does use her cell phone really well, but can barely use her computer. We want to make sure that, she's accommodated as well. And that's a big part of testing. And then user advocacy, really speaking as the voice of your user. And then the last thing that I think of when I think of testing is this idea of risk identification and mitigation. And we're going to get into that more. But testing is really about understanding and identifying risk and mitigating it as much as possible. And we're about to get a visitor, so I apologize. I'm going to throw it back to all of you again, and I'm going to apologize for the cat. How many different types of tests and methodologies do you think there are? And there's no right answer here. Just throw something out at me while I collect myself after the cat visitor.
Oh my goodness. So like star.dd. that's kind of what I think. Daddy Robot says more than one at least.
More than one at least. Okay.
Yeah, many.
So this is something my testing friends and I put together. This is the incomplete wall of testing. These are just like there's a ton of different frameworks and languages you can work in. There's tons of different ways to test and different tools and different methodologies to use. Things that go from as simple as unit testing, which we're going to talk about some, all the way up to things like pairing and mobbing, user acceptance, chaos testing, property-based, all of these different kinds of tests that all serve a different purpose. All of them kind of serve the need of your user differently. When we think about the difference between like A/B testing and penetration testing, both are really, really important and both do very, very different things. So when people say, well, you're just a tester, well, yeah, I'm just a tester, but look at all of these things that I do. Like there are all of these different ways to look at an application and all of these different ways to kind of serve the needs of our users and serve the needs of my customer, which ultimately are the developers, the business analysts, the company, and then my user. So before we go any further, a little bit of testing vocabulary for all of you. James Bach calls this the testing taxonomy. If you've ever heard that phrase, I don't like him very much, but a lot of this came from him. So thank you, Mr. Bach, for that. So first, we're going to talk about unit testing. Unit testing is really closely coupled to the code. This really just isolates a section of code and verifies its correctness. This is the very, very first bit of testing you do. And this is really testing that, as a tester, I count on you folks as the developers to do for me. I'm not going to write your unit tests. I'm not skilled to write your unit tests. And also, I wouldn't be meeting the heart of the purpose of a unit test if I did that. Unit testing really doesn't test anything other than ensuring that your asserts are right and that you're meeting the code quality standards that your group has agreed on. After we look at unit testing, we look at functional testing. That's kind of the next step in the test world. And functional testing tests against the requirements. This is your very first line of testing when it comes to actually touching the application. Functional testing is both manual and automated. And at Progressive, where I work, we actually ask our developers to do the functional testing for us. So they test against the requirements and verify that what they've built meets the requirement. They don't have to go into alternate paths. All they have to do is happy path. But doing that frees me up the opportunity to do the really important exploratory testing that really adds value. The next thing I want to talk about is this idea of smoke testing. Smoke testing and sanity testing are the two most beat up words in the testing vocabulary. Everybody uses them wrong. They interchange them. They're really not interchangeable. They're very distinct testing activities. Smoke testing is just blowing some smoke through your application. It tests only the most critical functions. So it's going to touch probably login. If you are a online retailer, it's probably going to touch the shopping cart, the sales process, and then logging out. It's not going to hit everything, and it's really just intended to be kind of a quick test to do, probably automated after you do some sort of code elevate or release something out into production. And it's certainly not going to tell you much, but it is going to tell you that your most basic, most important functions are up. And then sanity testing, on the other hand, a lot of people think of this as what you do after an elevate. It's not. It's really just test your new functionality. So if you were to have put something new into your shopping cart, maybe a save for later button, you're not going to test anything with sanity testing other than that function works and maybe one step before it in your process and one step after it. So if you broke something 3 steps down the line, you're not going to find that in sanity testing. You're not going to find that until you get to regression testing, which is kind of where I live. In regression testing, our test the most recent code change, or sometimes you just do them on a regular basis because you need to move servers around. But it's really where we find everything. This is where you go exploring. This is where we look to see that code changes haven't affected the rest of the application, not just the area around the change you made, but literally everything. So this is where we're going to know that changing the drop down for gender selection at user creation didn't break the logout function when you're ready to log out of the application. And that probably wouldn't happen, but it's just a generic story or idea to throw out. So this is kind of the new world of the software testing pyramid. The software testing pyramid used to look very different. I really like this one because it integrates this idea of manual session-based testing, as well as some additional automation testing that we're starting to do nowadays that we didn't used to do. So what I said about your unit tests, that is the base of your pyramid. That should be your largest test suite in your application. And your unit tests hopefully have 100% code coverage. I know I'm living in a fantasy world saying that, but I hope that you have 100% code coverage in your unit tests. Then we move up the pyramid just a little bit and we get to these automated component tests. Now, the dotted lines in here are actually meant to just separate these 3 different automation levels from each other. But if I was to rebuild this, I would make that dotted line manual testing. And the reason I would do that is because you can't just trust that these automated tests are accurate. We still have to test the tests. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but how do I know your automation is actually telling me anything? How do I know it's not just passing things and not actually testing anything? And that's happened. It really does. In fact, I just talked to a friend about it today. He's working on a talk based on it. So that dotted line is kind of my opportunity to go in and manually test these automated component tests that are happening and being built. And then we get to the automated integration tests. And again, we should be manually testing the test after the automated integration tests are built. And then the automated API tests. And to be honest, API is actually where I think manual is one of the most useful places. And I say that because there's a lot of unknown unknowns in API testing. And I love to tell this story because it's so weird. So bear with me. I worked for this company. They did this weird thing with vehicle tracking. And one of the things they did was they had an API integration with some of their biggest customers. And they would have these lists of drivers with a fleet manager. And there were no real rules around this in the API. There were rules in the front end, but of course that wasn't being reinforced in the back end. So you could have a fleet manager and then a list of drivers. And one day I was just playing with it. And I said, you know, what would happen if I took one fleet manager and made him part of another group of drivers? And it gave me a sub list. I was like, okay, well, that doesn't exist on the front end. You can't actually do that, but I guess it does now. And then I said, well, what happens if I take the manager for this fleet and put him into the other fleet? And they disappeared. Literally, I couldn't pull them back from the API. They no longer existed in the front end. And what was happening is I basically made them their own grandparents, and they never loaded again until somebody went in and manually fixed the database that I broke. The cool thing there is that we never would have found that just through our automation checks. The only way to find that is by somebody going out and playing with the system. What's kind of sad, though, is that who knows how many lists of drivers were corrupted and disappeared into the ether as far as the users were concerned for however many years, until someone went in and actually said, hey, what happens if I do this? Because they could absolutely do that. And there were probably business cases that would make it make sense to do that. So it's kind of my example of why you have to go in and test the tests. And then the next layer up, we get to our automated GUI tests. This is where we're testing our front end using probably Selenium, maybe Jasmine, maybe Protractor. Not everybody is even doing this kind of automated front end testing anymore. Some folks are moving to API only strategies. And then also in this automated GUI area, there are some new applications being built, like Applitools is my favorite, that do not only automated front end testing that they do kind of like Selenium is doing, but then they also use AI to ensure that not only are the objects on the page, but the objects are accessible, the objects are visible, and nothing has moved out of place. And there's way better explanations of what they're doing. But if you're interested, Applitools, look them up. They're on Twitter. They're doing cool stuff. And then up here at this very top is this manual session-based testing where I live. And this is where we're going in and we're doing exploring in the front end, and we're doing some exploring with the back end, and maybe even playing with the APIs a little bit. And I like that this model shows that manual session-based testing outside of the rest of the pyramid, because it really doesn't live in automation. It lives on its own. So I had mentioned this before, that testing is about risk and risk mitigation. So at Progressive, we have a very strict policy about risk. When I say that, we use risk as our guide for test coverage. And we determine the risk of each functional part of an application through 3 variables. So we look at the complexity, and the complexity is about how hard was it to build, how many different applications does it touch, how complicated is that piece of code, and then we look at the history. How often does this break? Does everything else break it? Do we not have any history on it? Is it brand new? And then we look at the impact. And the impact of failure is really, how much does this impact our customer? How much does this impact our brand? And how much risk does this put us at, both from potential liability and from embarrassment? And then we take all of those, and that tells us our total risk. Now, we have a system where we score risk between 1 and 5 for each of these categories. And our risk score, total risk score, where it says total risk, complexity, history, and impact, that can be a score of anywhere between 1 to 25. We get that number by looking at the impact and multiplying that times either the complexity or the history score. So if complexity was 5, history was 4, impact was 5, our risk score would be 25. Here's why that matters. That matters because I can then take those numbers as a test lead, because I'm a test lead for my project, and say, okay, I need to figure out what we're going to test. We're going into regression. What are we looking at for this application? How much time are we going to spend on each feature we need to look at? And I can sort it and say, okay, here's all of my risk score 25s, here's my 20s, my 16s, and so on and so forth. I can sort it that way and then make determinations on code coverage. I love that we use numbers because there's a difference between 25 and 3. There's a difference between 25 and 20. I'm able to make judgments based on that. There are other methods. Google uses kind of a heat map, and they go from green, which is low risk, to red, which is high risk. I don't like that because really what makes the difference between red and green? There's no weight there. Also, I had somebody tell me that they were red-green colorblind, and they couldn't see the risk matrix. It didn't mean anything to them because it was all the same color. So just something to think about. If you work with manual testers at all and you want to talk about risk, this is a good place to start. And if you need like a risk matrix to start working off of, hit me up on Twitter and I'm happy to send you one. So I also mentioned this idea of good enough quality. Good enough quality isn't saying, well, it's good enough for our users, I guess we're just going to throw it out there. What it's actually saying is we are confident that this is good enough and that we feel our users' needs are met by it. This is acknowledging that perfection isn't real. Nobody builds perfect software. So instead, we build software that is good enough to meet the needs of our users, understanding that it's meeting the needs based on the team's agreed upon definition of done. I love this quote by Sheryl Sandberg that done is better than perfect, because done is an achievable finish line. And one of the best ways to think about this is to think about training for a marathon. You don't go from me, like, I'm gonna be honest, I don't run. If you see me running, you should probably start running too, because something's probably chasing me. And you're probably going to get away and I won't. But you don't go from somebody like me who has never run a day in their life to running a marathon the next day. Instead, what you do is you set goals. You set a minimum viable product. You set a definition of done. And you say, okay, well, my first goal, my first definition of done is doing a 5K. Okay, I hit my 5K. Now I'm going to do a 10K. Now I'm going to do a half marathon. Now I'm going to do a full marathon. And you say, okay, well, I hit this goal. I actually got the marathon done. But you're not really done, right? Like, there's more you can do. You can do an ultra marathon. You can do an Ironman. So this idea of done being better than perfect says that there's always a next step, and there's always a new definition of done for your team to agree on and for your product to achieve too. So now we're getting into kind of the nuts and bolts of testing. I have rolled this out to my team of testers. I ask them to look at these questions when they're getting ready to test. So first I ask them to give me kind of an introduction of what they're testing. This one helps me understand what they were working on, and two helps them focus. So if they're testing a login page, what am I testing? I'm testing a login page. And the introduction is testing login page for whatever change was made. This applies to that page. It may also apply to your user management. What if you're setting up a new user, you're working on registration? It may apply to multiple places. What's your goal? Your goal is probably to prove that it works, but it might not be. It could be something else. And then if there are required resources, I always ask my testers to make sure that they've thought about their resources ahead of time. And resources doesn't just mean physical things. This could also be they need help from a developer to make a certain scenario happen, or they need special tools, or they don't know how to do this kind of testing. So one of their resources, maybe they need time to go out and do some research. And then what's out of scope? And this is super important because exploratory testing works in a time box, and it's really easy to fall down the rabbit hole. And it's really easy for developers to do it as well. You start working on something and, oh, I can make this better. Oh, I can do this differently. Oh, I can refactor this code. And next thing you know, your 3-point card just became a 20-point card because you just kept going and going and going and let scope creep happen. Same thing can happen in testing. So this kind of gives you an opportunity to focus and make sure you're hitting just the right things. And I want to talk about a couple of different ways to test and to document testing, because this is probably the most useful thing for developers to think about when they think about how to test their own code. So I love charters. Charters are kind of a very agile way of testing, especially when we talk about exploratory testing. You can test using test cases, and we're going to talk about those later. But testing with a test case is kind of like using GPS. It gives you turn-by-turn directions. Testing with a charter is more like using a treasure map. It kind of says, hey, take 5 paces this way and go look around. The treasure's somewhere around there within a couple of feet. So it kind of is the opportunity to really go explore. And instead of giving you a step-by-step approach, it gives you questions and it invites exploration. Charters are risk-focused. So you typically wouldn't write a charter for something that's low risk because there's very little value there. And it's session-based in a time box approach. What that means is, let's say I estimate that I want to spend an hour on this testing. If I want to spend an hour on it, I'm going to break that into 2 sessions of half an hour. That gives me an opportunity to try multiple workflows, to look at it with fresh eyes, to come back with different data. So it's inviting you to explore in multiple ways, not just one. And I included this just because this was such a neat little conversation I had with James. We were talking about why time boxing is important, excuse me. And what we came down to is that time box plus good risk evaluation helps you get to good enough quality. And he had this idea of enough driven working, which I loved. And enough driven working is basically, we've done enough. it is good enough. And I love that. And it's a great way to look at building software, that it is enough for our users, especially when we talk about doing things in an agile way. All right, so bear with me. I need to flip over to a document I want to show you. Let's hope this works right. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get it back to sharing again. There we go. Okay, I hope you all can see this. So this is an example of a charter. And this is actually the kind of charter that I use day to day at work. So the charter is just for shopping cart. This is all fake. None of this is real, but the structure is. So working with charters means that we are trying to merge testing together. We're not testing each individual card one at a time. Instead, we're taking multiple functional requirements and testing them as a whole. So here you can see where I said cards included. These are all of the different things that I'm covering, all of the different functional requirements and stories that I'm including in this charter. And I'm documenting things like, where is it being tested? What's our strategy? In this case, exploratory manual testing. We're going for look, feel, responsiveness, and function. And then basic information like breakdowns and start and end date. And then we get to what I think is most important. One, this idea of session notes. Session notes are details that you want to share. So here I'm saying we want to cover multiple products, single products, multiple departments, brands, different cart states, which would be empty, full, logged in, guest, an item left over. Fun thing about leftover items and that idea, from what I've heard from some people I know that work at Amazon, that is one of the most tested items, is when you leave your cart, are those leftover things saved and moved to the right place? Because their goal is to get you to buy them. So they don't ever want to leave things abandoned. They don't want to let that particular piece fall through the cracks because it makes them money. So their impact there, their impact to Amazon is huge. Impact to the customer might be a little bit less because if you really wanted it, you'll go look for it again. But Amazon wants to make it easy for you. So just something to think about when you're thinking about what do you test and how do you test? What has the most impact is what you want to go for first. And then we have these things to guide the testing process. This is our treasure map. I want to create a scenario where the item doesn't add to cart. I want to cover multiple products, multiple cart states. Notice I said create a scenario, not go look at what happens when I add an item to cart. The reason I do that is I don't want to give an opportunity for a yes or no answer. I want exploration. So I want you to have to tell me the story of what happened when you tried to create this scenario. Did it work? Could you actually create a scenario where it didn't add to cart? Or did you go on that adventure and look around and you weren't able to do it, but you're able to tell me all the different things that you tried to try and make it happen? Prove that leftover items appeared in the cart. You got to prove it to me. So show me a screenshot. Tell me the story of how you proved it. And same thing with what happens when items are removed from the cart. Tell me what happened. Walk me through it. Share with me the story of what happened when you tried to do that. And then we just have a little bit on documenting. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to flip back again. Hopefully it's easier this time. Okay, there we go. That's why. Oh, it took us back. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so we talked a little bit about charters. By the way, charters are a really good opportunity as a developer to pair with a tester. So if you have some folks in testing that you really want to work with, or that you'd like to learn something from, ask them to write a charter, or write a charter yourself, and then sit down and do some testing side by side with them. It'll really give you an opportunity to learn what they're looking for and how they test and how they kind of go exploring through the application. Now, this is a functional test script. I pulled this straight from a developer that I love working with, who is really, really good at documenting his test cases. In here, it's just a walkthrough of like what happens, this is the test condition I'm doing, and then what is my expected result. So on this one, if I'm at the selection page, what happens with this radio button, depending on who's logged in, what type of test it is. So it's a positive test. We're expecting a positive outcome. And then the status, which in this case is completed. And this is actually something that he shows me when we do a test handoff. And because this is a script, this is walking you through step by step. So when I mentioned the GPS, this is your GPS. This is your turn-by-turn directions on testing. And now we have this idea of functional test cases. A script and a case are very, very similar in that you build a script using individual cases. But unlike the previous one, which was a step-by-step, this is just individual cases to do. So if on network you navigate to a certain page, what do you expect to see? You expect to see the radio buttons. It's, again, a positive case. And in this case, the status is completed because he finished that testing. So one of the last things I want to leave you with is this idea that automation is not always the answer. Don't get me wrong. I love automation. It makes my life easier. However, automation only tells you what you already know. Automation can't tell you what you don't know. Only manual regression testing and manual exploratory testing can tell you that. So you want to automate your repetitive tasks. Things that drive your tester bonkers, please automate them. Don't make them do them over and over again. And you want to automate your pain points. If something is really, really, really hard to test manually, write an automation script for it. But keep in mind that your automation isn't going to tell you how the application feels. Only a person can tell you how your app feels. And automation can't tell you if it's accessible to everyone. Only about 30% of accessibility issues can be found using automation. The rest of them, you really have to dig in with your hands and start playing with it. And automation can't tell you about workflows you didn't know existed. And I'm totally stealing Jenny's thunder here, but my friend Jenny Bramble, she has a talk about risk-based testing, and she talked about how they did an Elevate and they had like all of their users calling, our system isn't working, it's not working, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And she's like, oh my gosh, what happened? What's going on? She goes in, she starts testing, she's like, it all works fine. I don't know what they're talking about. What it turns out is there was a workflow that their users were using that no one knew was there. Like the developer who had created that workflow was long gone. No one had bothered looking at it. And through the years, they just forgot about it. But when they did this new Elevate, they put this new code in, they broke that workflow and every user was calling, panicking. So automation isn't going to tell you that because it's an unknown. The only thing that's going to tell you that is doing exploration. So I want to open it up to all of you. Do you have any questions for me? I'd love to answer them.
All right, we'll give the delay a second to go through. All right. So jokingly, it was a comment, it was probably like 20 minutes ago.
Oh.
He was saying, how do you test the test then? It's tests all the way down, nothing but tests.
Don't get me started on that because there are a lot of layers of tests. But yeah, you do have to test the test. That's a big thing.
All right. Oh, we have a very specific question.
Okay.
Do you think the charter process works well for development teams which don't have separate test teams?
Yes. And here's why.
Okay.
If you don't have separate testers, no one's really spending that time doing the exploration. So charters give you an opportunity to have a roadmap that isn't directional, that's really open to really start working through your application. Testing and development have very different mindsets. And people always say, well, testers go in and break things. I don't break anything. I don't write code. What I do is I break the illusion that it ever worked. And so if you have a team of all like-minded people, all thinking the same way, you're not going to find those issues because you all share that mindset. You don't want to go in and start like hitting things with hammers. You want to be nice to your friends. You want to be nice to their code. So charters really are a good way to get in there and get your hands dirty, and probably to do it as a team. It's a great way to have everybody go mob on the application, write a couple of charters, and take an hour where everybody starts testing. Or maybe you treat it like mob programming and you sit down together at one computer and start testing.
Awesome. There was a follow-up question. How do you build confidence in time box testing? Is there any way to show or document that you've covered enough edge cases?
So good enough quality. And this idea of risk-based testing says that edge cases may not show value, may not return quality or value. So this edge cases depend on how much impact the edge case has.
Yeah.
If you have an edge case that only affects 1% of your users, sorry, I'm not going to look at it. If you have an edge case that affects 25% of your users, I'm going to look at it. So if you work on a team that doesn't, or at a company that doesn't get this idea of good enough quality, which is really the new way of handling quality, then it's not going to reap the rewards you're looking for.
I can say from our code bases, we have bugs that were lodged, say a year or two ago. And this one person had an issue. So we recorded it to at least have a record that it happened. And I was going back through the backlog and I found these bugs. I'm like, no one's complained about this since we put this issue in. And we haven't taken steps to try to fix it. So either it was an anomaly at the time, or something else we fixed the issue, or other things. And it's just easy to close that issue. So if someone complains again, we'll open another one, or we'll reopen this one. But yeah, we have those edge cases all the time. And I've learned just through my experience to ignore them. Ignore them until 2 or 3 people complain. And then it's probably something we need to look at more seriously.
I mean, it's all about cost versus benefit.
Yeah.
And especially in Agile teams, what's our definition of done? What's our MVP? If that edge case is too edge casey, it's not in our MVP.
Yeah. All right. We'll give it another 10, 15 seconds for any other questions. We had a good crowd in here, so
yay.
Good amount of chat before we got started, but everyone started paying close attention when you started talking. All right. Well, here's what we can do. We can go ahead and wrap up the stream here, and we'll go to what we call the after show. So the after show won't be recorded, but people can ask questions as long as they're hanging out with us. So we'll go ahead and do this. Jenna, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
You're welcome.
And we'll have to have you back on in another like 9-12 months or so. So if you're out there watching the recorded version of this, or you're with us on the live stream, we do this live. It's always Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. The day of the month kind of varies, but follow SwiftKick on Twitter, and I also will have links to our YouTube page. We're always talking about the SwiftKick show, and we have a lot of really great people, including Jenna, on the show. We just love having smart people come and talk to us. We will see you all next time. Have a great day. All right. So recording is done. We are now in the after show. Yay.
You want me to stop the share?
Yeah.
So if you love having smart people, why'd you have me?
Oh, no. You're smart. You're
I'm
awesome.
kidding.
I started this more as a reason, like I love user groups, and I don't like traveling to user groups, and I'm limited in the user groups I can go to locally. So why don't I just do this online and make it more accessible to people? And like I find that folks are more willing to participate from the comfort of their own homes or offices than they are. It's like, oh, I have to get in a car, or in some cases on a plane, and travel to a group, or I can just do this from home, and people can attend from the comfort of their own homes too. So just provide the platform and people will come. That's
I love anything I can do in my pajamas.
Yeah.
I actually own a user group. We meet tomorrow, but it's a testing group.
I've been running a user group for 10 years. It's been a great opportunity. I've met some amazing people, and the whole reason was I just wanted to bring smart people into my hometown. Nice. So I didn't want to have to drive. It was totally selfish. I didn't want to drive anywhere. So let me just bring them all to me. But then you have folks like Jonathan who say, you weren't at the user group last month. Where were you? So in 10 years, I've only missed like a handful of meetings. So it's not that
I
bad.
wasn't at my own meetup last month. People were like, where were you? And it's, a family emergency. Really, they're like, why aren't you here? Like, well, it was already scheduled. So I found somebody to run it for me.
Absolutely. And that's the real strength of it too, is if it can run without you being there. That's what happened in our cases. It will go on as long as everything's taken care of beforehand. It will just happen, whether or not I'm there. Jonathan just wanted to make sure I was okay. Yeah, he hadn't heard from me since the user group. I appreciate that, Jonathan. But very cool. Well, Jenna, I appreciate it so much. And this will be live on YouTube, actually almost immediately. So we're going to take the recorded version and replace what was live. So it'll cut out all the pre-show banter and then all this post-show banter.
Nice.
But excellent. Well, thank you again. And thank you everyone who watched live. We had a really good spread across YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Mixer, and Periscope. So once we're done, I'll get the final numbers and I'll let you know how the final count looked.
Awesome.
Actually, it looks like Restream was having some issues with the analytics. Like it wasn't reporting the YouTube numbers.
Okay.
And that was significant. So I'll have to wait till the final report comes in.
Okay.
But awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone watching live, and we will talk again sometime.
Yay.
All right. Take care, Jenna. Have a great day.
You
Bye.
too.
All right. End meeting.